Hi, I'm Mark Stoudemire, and welcome to Season 3 of Get to the Joke. I can't wait for you guys to see what I have in store for you this season. 11 new comics, 11 new stories, unbelievable amount of just advice and just vulnerability about the lives of comedians and how that translates to the jokes that you love to hear on stage. Again, all the content this season will be completely free on my YouTube channel. I just ask that you do me just one small favor. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Please rate and review me wherever you review your podcast. I truly appreciate that you guys do that for me. Again, you can also visit me at my website, markstod.com, where you can see all my upcoming show dates, along with any other content that I put out. Again, please leave a comment, like, subscribe to this channel. It means so much to me that you do that. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the joke.
This is kind of a weird job to have, while being a father, right? Because if you guys are familiar with comedy or comedians, we're all pretty low-functioning, mentally ill people. So I have nobody to talk this real-life adult shit with. You know what I mean? Even my friends, they just, they end up making it uncomfortable and weird. And I remember my first day back to comedy. Right? It was 4 days after my son was born. Not much of a paternity leave. I came back to this comedy club, and my friends were there, a couple of them. My one friend, she was so excited to see me. She was like, "Oh my God, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. I'm so happy. I do have a question. I've always wanted to ask a new parent this. Did having a baby change your stance on abortion?" I was like, weirdly enough, I've been kind of focusing on having an alive baby this whole time. Haven't really considered it. She's like, "No, I mean in terms of when life begins, right? Because you watch the whole pregnancy, you watch the birth. When do you think life begins? Do you think life begins at conception, or do you think it begins at birth?" And I didn't answer, because I know a trap when I hear one. It's like, why don't you tell me what to think, white lady? She's like, "Okay, I think life begins when the woman decides to carry out the pregnancy." I was like, "Oh, I don't think there's any science that would back up that theory." I'm for it, though. I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-murder, to be perfectly honest. I am. Somebody cuts me off on the highway, I'm like, my body, my choice. I'm gonna kill this motherfucker. I'm gonna drive my car into the back of their sedan and perform a 38th trimester abortion. Don't do the math. I think that makes them 11. But of course my perception changed, right? How could it not? I actually don't believe life begins at conception. I also don't think life begins at birth. I think life begins at 6 months when the kid can finally hold his own fucking head up. Seriously, what a truly useless... Can't fend for himself, he's scratching his cornea every day. My son's not alive, he's on life support. My wife and I are nursing him into one day being a real boy. We have 2 cats. If either of them behaved as uselessly as my son, we would put them down. We're like, "Oh my God, you have no quality of life. Come here, shh."
All right, welcome to Season 3 of Get to the Joke. I'm Mark Stoudemire, and my guest today is Mike Cannon, who is a New York City comedian, actor, and podcaster. Mike recently released his independently produced comedy special, Life Begins, which is amazing, on YouTube, which has amassed hundreds of thousands of views, along with making a spot on Laugh Button's top 35 comedy specials of 2020. Mike recently earned critical acclaim for his acting in the lead role of the feature film Timing on Amazon Prime. Also amazing. His first comedy album, I Think It Just Kicked In, debuted at #1 on the iTunes comedy charts. He's a regular guest on several Sirius XM radios and is the co-host of Here's the Scenario podcast and host of Heads Up and Mike Takes Edibles. Mike, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, buddy. How you doing?
Good. It's been a minute since I've seen you. I think the last time I saw you, we were at a Elks Club in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere. And we were working for Wisecrackers, and it was quite the show.
I liked both of those. I liked the Elks Lodge, and then we did some other thing too, right? In
like a ballroom or something.
Tyrone.
Yeah.
We did a Tyrone, Pennsylvania, then we did State College, and then something else. Yeah.
You're right. I remember you and I were relating to each other about Wisecrackers, and we were talking about how we both had run-ins with this notorious booker named Chris Carroll, who ran the room in Allentown, and she was so impactful into your life that she's made one of my favorite comedy tracks of any CD or album, which is Allentown on your first special.
I was just in Allentown, Pennsylvania. The person that said yeah has never been there ever. Have you been there? What a dog shit town that is. Holy fuck. I know Billy Joel has a song about it, but I have a few choice words of my own about that place. I'm pretty sure their town motto is drinking while pregnant. I think that's what's written on their municipal building. There are quite a few mutants up in that piece. One of which booked the show I was doing. I was performing in a Ramada Inn because shit is going good. And the woman that booked me was like instantly evil, instantly nasty. She sounded like she ate a carton of Cool cigarettes. And she was about 5'3" by 5'3". Just a perfect circle of a person. She had the most inexplicable teeth I've ever seen in my entire life. Have you run into this in 2017? Where you're like, oh, you haven't taken advantage of any of the advancements in dentistry over the last 100 years because it is fucking mayhem in your mouth. Seriously, how is it post 2K and you look like Captain Jack Sparrow? It is bananas. So like 3 seconds before I go on stage, right, she kind of rolled over to me. And she gets right in my ear and she's like, by the way, this is a clean club. This is a no language room. I was like, I don't even know what the fuck that means. No language room? What do you want me to fart into the microphone? Not even body language? Like what can I do? So I'm immediately in my head trying to go through the material that I think even fits her criteria. And I get on stage 3 seconds after I say hello, some dude in the front row who is using his mullet as a beer koozie stood up, heckles me and goes, I think I seen your dick on Snapchat.
I have to just ask you and get into it. What exactly transpired between the two of you? Because she's a pill. She's a pill.
Yeah.
And, I don't think anyone has really good things to say about her. And now she's like a big Q person. But
no kidding. That makes all the sense in the world.
Oh my God. She's I think she's the only person on True Social at this point. But what transpired between you and her, and then that led to like spots on an hour of your time? You gave her one of them.
I mean, that just shows
exactly happened. I want to know the meat of that story.
Yeah, it more or less speaks to just how truly petty I am. I mean, that probably on anybody else wouldn't have left even a divot in their consciousness, but for whatever reason, she just rubbed me the wrong way, because it's a bit of a drive, I guess, or not even at that point, but I wasn't on the road all that much. I was sporadically, but I was starting to do it a bit more, and I was really excited about doing it because I was gearing up for the album that I was gonna record it, obviously, without that chunk. And then I get there, and the hotel itself looks like it's been burned down several times and then rebuilt on top of the
I think it's
ashes.
actually condemned now, to be honest.
Yeah, of course it is. So, I mean, that was in and of itself just kind of a nightmare. I walked in and I was like, oh, cool. I'm like sleeping on blood jizz, which is super sweet. And then, I unpack, do whatever, and I get down to the room and I'm like, oh, can I get food? And they're like, yeah, full price. Like instantly. Didn't say, yeah, of course, here's a menu. And then, oh, I'm sorry, just a heads up, the comedians have to pay full price. They were like, yeah, full price. And I'm like, cool, like immediately aggressive, immediately dickheads. And then I forget what she had said to me, but it was something like moderately insulting immediately. Like it went up to me and goes, do you have 25? And I was like, you booked me, right? Like you knowingly accepted my tape and then booked me, and we're here now. Like, I thought we got past this part. I thought that was kind of like the screening process. I've already driven here. Like, yes, I have 25 minutes. And so she was just like super put off, aggressive in kind of short bursts. So it wasn't like she said anything even personal beyond that. It was just kind of like, the dehumanizing shit that some bookers decide to treat you with right off the bat, which is just, I've never been tolerant of that.
Yeah.
And then whatever, I eat the dog shit chicken fingers or whatever that they had for $48 and then walk towards the room, which was going to be, it was a Wounded Warriors fundraiser. Exactly. And which I'm fine with. I've done those before. They're typically great audiences. Like, that's great. But the reason why that's relevant is because of the next thing that she told me, which I'm about to walk on stage. The host is literally about to bring me up. And she goes, by the way, this is clean. Like, this is a clean show. And I just looked at her and I was like, no, it isn't. And she was like, it is. And you have to be clean. And I was like, I don't. And you should have told my agent that before I got here, because I certainly wouldn't have agreed to do this if that was the case. Like, you saw my fucking tape, like whatever. So I'm literally arguing with her while I'm also inching towards the stage. And I'm just like, I'm pissed off. I'm like, wow, that's so weird. She just immediately kind of like took me out of my own head. I no longer know what bits I'm going to do, because now I'm kind of like siphoning through my head and trying, because at that point, it's like, it's not even about her. Like, if the Wounded Warriors wanted me to be clean, then I understand that. You know what I mean? Then it's like, whatever. That's like what they are paying for and expecting. So I'm like going through my head trying to like switch shit out. And, if you've listened to my album, I can be a bit filthy or at least graphic.
It's not that bad. Yeah, it's not as bad as you would make it out to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like filth. It's just like, I have a flowery way of speaking, so I can make things that aren't dirty feel graphic. But so she, I'm going through my head, and I swear to God, just like in the bit, within moments of me being on stage, a guy says, I think I seen your dick on Snapchat. And he truly had a mullet. He had cut sleeves with like, an eagle flying through two engulfed in flame American flags, which I actually thought is anti-patriotic, but for whatever reason, it means more pro-America on his arm. and I'm just like, I instantly was like, well, fuck this and fuck you and fuck this clean bullshit. These guys have watched their friends die face down in the mud, from the famous Lebowski quote. It's like, what? I can't offend them. So I just did my set and I murdered. Like, I did great. And then I got off stage and walked back, and she's like, what the fuck was that? You're supposed to be clean. And I was like, call my agent right now. If that's what you want, then fine. I'll leave literally right the fuck now. Give me the pay for one show and I'll get the fuck out of your hair right now. And of course she didn't. She just wanted to piss and moan and try to yield whatever small town horseshit power that she had over me. So I actually feel bad for the town of Allentown, because there's people that find that bit on YouTube that are like, truly hurt. Like, and like, this is where I've grown up. I raised a family here. Like, what is your problem? And I'm like, well, I was hoping the joke would be very clearly specified towards this one person. And the joke is that I was in a Ramada Inn and I got food poisoning. So I was in two places in Allentown. Certainly I don't have the 360 scope of the city that that everybody else does, but people just focus on the hurtful shit.
It's your use of language and your use of being able to paint a picture with your language so quickly and so relatably within just a few seconds is incredible and so talented of yourself. And I don't even know if I mean, there's maybe like one other comic I can think of that's somewhere in the realm that you can do it. But like, unlike an author who can like lead up to like lead up to like a plot point with a use of visual imagery, you're doing it so quickly. We're going to talk about that. Oh man, no, you're incredible. I want to get that story out of the way just in case this interview got cut short, but happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Did you do anything exciting for your birthday, or are you still kind of like, is New York City still kind of locked down at this point?
No, New York is normal, but I mean, I have a son at this point, so it's not, I don't drink anymore, so it's nothing like that.
Nice.
But we did 5 days in Aruba. I was doing gigs out there, so I was able to bring my family along as kind of a work vacation, which was super cool. And then the 26th, the night before, me, Mike Feeney, and Brendan Sagalow, who I host a podcast with, we did a live stand-up show and a live pod, and just sold 300 tickets, like had the greatest show, just really a great time. So that was more or less my gift.
So I want to get into kind of what this webinar is about, and which is just kind of like how your jokes form based on your life. And I just wanted to talk to you, who are I admire you so much as a stand-up. What you're able to do is so unique and so high level and so quick and intelligent. And just the way you even do tell your jokes is incredible. But to more focus on that, I would say, you're such a great performance, like a performance artist. Your podcast is incredible. Your acting and timing is incredible. Your stand-up is even more incredible. I know you come from a family where performance art is some mainstay. You have two sisters, both of which are vocally talented, but are also in different aspects of art. Your father was a stockbroker and your mother was a homemaker. So was there an emphasis growing up where performance art or something in the arts was honed upon, or is that just coincidence where the stars aligned and the three of you guys were just really exceptional in this field?
So my mom was a homemaker in the sense that she watched all of us. She didn't have a traditional job, but she was an artist. She went to college for art. She multimedia artist, where she builds furniture now. She does huge portraits, huge murals, things like that. Like she's very, very gifted visually, and just, has always kind of put an onus on that, on expressing yourself and giving yourself the space to, do whatever you'd like. But I mean, my father was an actor also before he was a stockbroker. So he, obviously that was just in the back of my mind as something you could do, but also in the back of my mind as something you couldn't do once you had a family, because he made it very clear that that shattered his entire trajectory. So that kind of influenced the decision. But to be perfectly honest, I was the not artist of my family. Like I could always draw and write and stuff like that, but I was the athlete. Both of my sisters were musicians. They were singers. I could hold a tune, but I certainly had didn't have the level of talent that either of them had. So for me to jump in, into comedy, which, sure, I'm an artist. Why not? I talk about my penis in an odd and colorful way. That's art. And, that came later in my life and kind of took not a reckoning, but almost like a personal, like, hey, this has always been inside of you. You should allow yourself to do this. My younger sister is a bit of a savant musically. Like she was basically fluent in piano by the time she was 5 years old. Like really, really gifted. My older sister is perfect pitch. Both of them have, incredible singing voices that my parents fostered while growing up. I didn't really show an interest in that shit. So I was doing all sports. I was going to sports camp every single summer, basketball, mostly soccer sometimes. But when I was younger, I did show an ability to draw. And my mom did foster that, where she sat down with me. She gave me some stuff to do. I had some pretty weird motor function problems when I was younger, like my hands shake and I couldn't really color in the lines because of that. And, just weird stuff. I couldn't cut very well. And my mom sat me down pretty much every day after school and not necessarily drilled it into me like she's, Captain Von Trapp, but she at least made me work with it and practice and get better at that stuff and encourage me to continue on.
But no. So there's the fact that the three of you have excelled now. I mean, was there like an onus, especially of yourself? You said your mom sat with you and helped you draw, but like even with sports, was there more like a focus? Your parents were either like, hey, you need to spend X amount of time a day working on, in your case, I know you were very talented in soccer. Like, was that like, Was the focus more like, hey, school and extracurriculars should have the same amount of time focus, or was it up to you?
No, it was school, man. Like,
Okay.
and to my parents' chagrin, both of my sisters are excellent students, and I was not. I
Yeah.
was I was one of those students who would kind of hover around a B at all times without trying. And that
Mhm.
was kind of good enough just to keep my parents off my ass. And that's
Yeah.
more or less how I operated, because
Mhm.
every once in a while when I'd get yelled at and hit or whatever, I'd
Mhm.
I'd study, I'd get 100 or get a great
Yeah.
grade. My teacher would be like, "This is exactly what we're talking about if he just puts in any effort." And then I'd
Mhm.
just coast for a few months, and everybody would be just so frustrated with me. So sports were something that I excelled at immediately,
Mhm.
and my parents actually leveraged them kind of against me to get me to do better in school. So it was always being threatened to be taken away, as opposed to like, and don't get me wrong, they encouraged me in the sense that they sent me to camp.
Yeah.
I was allowed to play. I did
Yeah.
all those things. I
Yeah.
played AAU, all that stuff, but it definitely was used as a punishment tool of being like, if you don't do this, if you don't get your grades, you're out of basketball or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Which is, that's hard for a kid, to
Yeah.
understand it. And now you're a father yourself. And I think
Mhm.
you and I are both the same age. We both
Mhm.
have children are relatively around the same age. I know you being a good dad means a lot to you. And
Everything, yeah.
I've done copious of research, via interviews and stuff on yourself. And there's a parallel between your own father and his relationship with you and and the converse relationship you have with your own son.
Definitely.
Knowing that kind of system that you grew up in, where things that you enjoyed like sports and just being kind of like that class clown character, and because you had such an interest in comedy at such a young age, um, what would be your kind of parenting tool now to your son? If you see a lot of yourself in him around the same age?
I do. I mean, it's weird because he's 2.5. He'll be 3 in
Mhm.
July, but
Mhm.
he's already gifted at sports, and
Yeah.
he already can play soccer. He can dribble a basketball, which is crazy.
That's
It,
two and a half
it,
year old.
it's crazy, dude.
That's
It's like
crazy.
he really has
I still
has
can't dribble.
he has great ability, but I think the one thing, and this is probably of our generation, I'm sure it maybe has
Yeah.
gotten better, who knows, but
Mhm.
my teachers and my parents didn't do a great job in inspiring me with positivity or with
Mhm.
things that I'm interested in. Instead,
Mhm.
they tried to inspire by removing what I'm interested in as
Yeah.
a punishment
Mhm.
to do what I hate.
Mhm.
Because I
Yeah.
just like, for whatever reason, my brain, when it gets to math, I get very easily overwhelmed.
Mhm.
I get disorganized. I don't have that type of brain,
Mhm.
or at least not naturally.
Mhm.
And it's easier to throw my hands in the air and kind of just be like, fuck this, man, than it is to just buckle down and really focus through it. So that kind of thing where I'm like threatening to take away the one thing that inspires my child,
Mhm.
that's not an avenue I'm prepared to go down.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm going to try to do what I felt that I was missing, which is use the things that inspire him to motivate him to get better at stuff that he's not necessarily strong at.
Yeah.
And I'm already talking to him as if he's, an adult, and not in the
Mhm.
sense that like we're talking about sex and shit, but just
Yeah.
in terms of like
Yeah.
lesson where I frankly tell him, so whenever he freaks out, he doesn't want me to show him something or whatever, and I'm like, hey man, you're not going to understand this right now, but one of the biggest, not regrets, but my problem as a young kid was that I needed to find out everything for myself. I needed to teach myself. I didn't allow anybody to help me. I didn't allow people to really teach me things because I thought I either knew better or that it was a sign of weakness that I was accepting instruction. So that I'm trying to let him know that, and even as an adult, I struggle with that. Like, with older comedy people or anybody, advice, business stuff, whatever. I have a problem with asking for help. So I want him to feel very comfortable with doing that. And
Yeah.
that's something I'm trying to foster at an early age.
That's so mature of you. Especially, the what I've seen is, what I've read about you. You said the relationship with your parents was closed off and impersonal.
Mhm.
Is First of all, is it still that way? Or now that you are a father yourself, have they kind of like come around and try to make up for the lack of parenting on their end, trying to parent your kid? Have they Have wounds been amended, or still the same as it was when you're talking about in your special?
I think both, right?
Okay.
And impersonal. That's not the right word to describe my mother and I's relationship. Like she was always very hands-on, obviously being at home, and she had her own struggles. And obviously my parents' marriage didn't work out, so they had their own shit cooking with that as well. But she was definitely really hands-on and wanted me to do well and wanted me to succeed and wanted me to feel loved. I just don't know if she had every tool in her tool belt, because she grew up with withholding parents as well. So, everybody's trying to cope with their personal trauma while trying to improve upon it. And sometimes those waters get really murky, and it's difficult when you're, if you don't have another sounding board or whatever. Like their relationship, they weren't very great communicators. So I don't know if they really got on the same page in terms of parenting. My father, definitely impersonal growing up. I think there was a time where we were thick as thieves and we were like, truly cool. And he was a great dad. And I think at some point he got frustrated by life, maybe his relationship, maybe us, whatever. And he started to kind of distance himself from that stuff. And at this point, it's still a bit impersonal, but he's more involved than he was. When I filmed that special, Life Begins, that was like, I had just had my son. We were not talking, my father and I, at all. We had some we've had issues for a long time, physical, violent, screaming, all that type of shit. And then it got okay, always trying to make amends, but he'd always kind of like do something where it just let down the entire process. And then gearing up as my wife was pregnant, there was just more turmoil that I saw him trying to cause than actually being a help with all of this uncertainty and me becoming a dad and all this stuff. So I kind of X'd him out for a while. I was like, I can't allow you to poison my well, because I'm trying my very best to ascend past this. I don't want this to imprint upon my son, because it's been that way for generations in my family. It's just a bunch of men that do not feel comfortable communicating with each other based on their own personal trauma with their father. So if I can do anything to break that cycle, even a little bit, then I feel like I've succeeded. But I also, as a person, come from an Irish Catholic family where grudges are paramount. My parents have grudges with their siblings that they've held on to for years, decades, whatever, still without talking, all that kind of thing. So it's important for me to, even no matter how much my dad and I don't get along, however much he hurts me or whatever, I do want to show both to myself, to him, to whatever, that I'm capable of being an open human being that is accepting to growth. So now all that shit, I'm the dad now. Like I almost feel like his father in the sense where he's fucked up. He's an old man, he's in the back nine or whatever. So, and he's never had a loving, doting dad or anybody that offered him as much empathy and slack as I'm currently offering him. So, there's certain moments where I'm trying to incorporate him in my son's life, and just judging by his reaction, I'm like, oh, no man has ever done this for you. like ever. And I'm your son, but I'm still a man, but I'm recognizing the foreignness in his eyes and feeling and just being like, whoa, like, what is this reaching out and hugging and communication and love and acceptance and all that stuff. So that's important to me, man, is breaking beyond what everybody has deemed the right course throughout the history of my lineage.
Well, I mean, that's so big of you. I mean, even, I guess would you also recognize in him the fact that he wasn't able to ask for help, and so you're kind of doing that for him, kind of like what you were saying, you grew up in the condition of you. Do you think that, and by that I mean, do you have evidence or whatever around the fact that did your dad resent your fame level today? Do you think there is resentment about the fact that you are now a nationally touring headliner with a special on YouTube that has amassed, hundreds of thousands of views? You work at the best comedy club in the entire world. Is there resentment on his part that you have now somehow carved out a path that he was never able to figure out how to carve out?
I think that was definitely initially the truth. Yeah, like in my career initially, I don't know if it's there now. I think now he kind of probably enjoys sharing in a bit of the spotlight,
Yeah.
and not as if I'm involving him or including him, but more
Yeah.
or less like, look at my son, on
Yeah.
Facebook. Like
Yeah.
he's very big on that. He's not necessarily huge on the actual parenting, but he's very big on the celebrating milestones that make it look like he's been a great parent.
Well, you have said that your dad had a profound impact on your life. You said, like, I mean, you mentioned he was the funny one, and
Mhm.
you even mentioned when you were younger that you would be more of like kind of like this disruptive, humorous kind of person in school. Was that kind of a way of getting your father's attention? Did you kind of seep onto this nugget of, hey, my dad is really funny. If
Mhm.
I can be funny, then my dad will be like, hey, he's just like his old man kind of thing. Is that maybe why you're going that route?
Subconsciously, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always loved being funny, but I thought, this is the common thing that a lot of comedians say, where
Mhm.
I didn't know that this was a job. I didn't really know you could do it. I just assumed funny would go with whatever I did. So,
Mhm.
funny teacher, funny cop, whatever. I didn't really think that it was going to be my main source of, how I provide for my family.
Yeah.
But yeah, I must have been. I think being good at sports also
Mhm.
was like, none of you are good at sports. Nobody plays. None of my sisters don't play. You two don't play sports. My
Yeah.
father was an actor growing up, like even,
Mhm.
actor troublemaker growing up. He didn't do shit. He was like a little rascal, basically running around throwing marbles and tailpipes,
Yeah.
So I just to set myself apart, but to excel at something was always kind of both a fuck you and to also please love me
Yeah.
for being good at this thing at the exact same time.
Yeah. But when it comes to your father and your relationship with him and the way that you have now kind of become a comedian, what was his initial? Did you ever like ask your dad when you first started, like, "Hey, I'm a comic," and see what he would have said? Did you hide it from him? What did you kind of? What was your dad's reaction to you being a comic, and when did you feel it was good to invite him to
His
the show? Has he seen you
his
before?
reaction was of course I will write bits for you. Like that was it. That's and I get that a lot still from family members to this day, extended family members who are like, oh dude, I got the shit, I got what you need.
That's good for you. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, even since I started doing stand up, two of my uncles got into stand up comedy and my father went back to acting, which is just classic Irish support. It's not good for you, you've inspired me. It's if this pussy can do it, I can fucking do it. So that's more or less what it was, and I never really hid it from him because we weren't close enough to share in it much to begin with. But he definitely he always came to shows, but again, more as kind of like I'm the guy that made this, not so much as the look at my boy up there.
Yeah. Has he been disruptive at your shows?
No, the only time he was disruptive was during my special Life Begins, and he didn't not and disruptive in the sense that we were cut off. We were not talking at all. I didn't invite him to the special. I didn't tell him about it. I gave him, he knew he was blocked on all social media, all everything. And he showed up. He came unannounced, and first time seeing him in probably nearly a year, and like walked up to me and was like, "What's up?" Like as I was about to go on stage.
Yeah.
And I just remember that like very fucking me up, and just being like, what the fuck? Like, come on, even my biggest night of my career, you have to like do this. You have to take the spotlight. It's all about you, motherfucker. You couldn't do this a night before. You couldn't come to my house. You know exactly where I live. It's got to be on the biggest stage. It's got to be on my big night. It's got to be about you. And that's the show that we ended up using for the special. Like whatever that did, I as an athlete, I always admire these guys that like are like, Jordan or whoever that are like, and I took that personally, so I scored 65 points. Anytime I got mad as an athlete, it took me out of my game. I played better with joy. So anytime I was mad, I sucked because I'd be pressing or doing too much and trying to do too much, trying to succeed too hard. But for whatever reason, that was my Michael Jordan, and I took it personal. And I got on stage and I used all of those feelings and all of that anger and whatever, and I put it into that performance. And I still that's still one of the things that I can watch and been like, oh, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that hour. I'm proud of what I did. I feel like I think it just kicked in is strong in my opinion, but it's for me, I've gotten better since then, in my opinion. I know what I did there. I know what I've excelled at. I know the confidence that I now have that I did not have then. To other people, they may not even, they might not see that or even think that's true. They might like that better than what I'm currently doing. But in terms of how I feel on the inside, I know where I'm at now more. And that, that certainty is kind of, it's motivating. It pushes you,
Yeah. Now it's, the question I have then is, so this is the biggest sign of your life. You always have come off to me as like a chill dude. I'm assuming like this, you said having right before a stage. I'm sure your wife is there. Like, what the hell is happening? Did you ever like go over to Mike DiStefano and be like, get this guy out of here? Did you ever think, or would you think they would never do that? Like, hey, he paid his $20 or whatever, he's gonna stay here, kind of thing.
No, the Comedy Cellar is no joke. They'll eject my son. Like if I ask them to, they don't give a shit. But it was more like, okay, you're here. Then I'm gonna. The only unfunny part of that special is like a 45-minute description or a 45-second description of my father's physical traits. And it's just a not funny, angry insult. Like I'm just being like a fat-headed fuck it. Like you could hear it in my voice that I'm like, there is legitimate rage behind it. And I actually think it helped to crescendo the rest of that bit. But the descriptor, that little intro into the bit is like, I mean, I isolated it the other day and like considered putting it out as a clip, but it's just like, it's harsh, man. It is a harsh moment.
Your Achilles heel is the man who not birthed you, but like helped, and he's sitting there. Was there ever a moment afterwards, like, so like everyone's high-fiving you because it's an incredible special? Does he come up to you at the end and go, "What the fuck, Mike?" Does he ever come up to you and like put you like kind of like corner you over it, or maybe even days later it calls you or something?
No, calling is out of the question. But he did come up to me, and this is the line that he often says, not editorial, but he looked at me, shook my hand, and said, "Revisionist history," and then walked out.
Oh shit!
And I was like, and honestly, right when he did that, I turned to my friend and fucking high-fived him right in front of my dad, because I was like, that's exactly what I wanted. You came here. You asked for this. You wanted to see what I'm doing. You wanted to bask in the congratulations of what I've accomplished on my own with zero of your support. So there you go, buddy. This is my truth, and you got to sit with this shit.
Yeah. There's a big emphasis on this physical fight between your father and you. And it's crazy to kind of imagine like 20-year-old Mike Cannon and 40-plus-year-old Mike Cannon Senior. I don't know what his name is, but physically swing at you guys getting into it. Was he more physically abusive or verbally, just like shutting you down all the time? Like or was it more just him just like not even wanting to be your father? What was the more stingiest part of the relationship with your dad?
So he was more, it's double-edged sword a little bit, because he definitely was, he hit me a few times. My mom was the primary physical abuser, but I will say that we've since had our conversations in which that she is apologized for everything, beat for beat, everything. And we've had real in-depth conversations that have allowed our relationship to grow. My mom had a real come to Jesus moment once she got a divorce and kind of understood whatever was working in her head and heart was through the filter of an unhappy relationship and marriage. And that, that could poison somebody, that could allow them to act in a way that they do not want to, even if it's natural. So my mom has since apologized for all of that stuff. My dad was definitely really distant, but also extremely domineering. So he's a big, imposing guy. He's 6'2", 206. And I have this voice, and he has a much deeper voice. His voice is like real, like tuba bass. That's the Frank Rigatone voice. That's like my real man voice. It comes out all the time because that's how my father would talk to me.
Yeah.
And so even if he wasn't physically abusive, the imposing shit, like, not even to get political, but just like, when Trump was like leering over
Yeah.
Hillary in the debates
Yeah.
and shit like that. It was a lot of that stuff, like a
Yeah.
lot of kind of like looming over to just make
Yeah.
his presence felt, and the discomfort that I felt from that was a success in his eyes.
Now, were you the target of both your parents' abuses across the board, or was it equal opportunity with your sisters as well, or was it more focused on you?
It was more focused on me. My younger sister definitely got her fair share of shit because she's the third. She had enough. she saw how it went. My older sister is the perfect child, at least.
Yeah.
Got perfect grades, really talented, extremely nice, probably too nice because she took on a lot of the parental responsibilities that they either unnaturally, or they wouldn't do because it was unnatural, or they didn't want to do, and she picked up slack because she saw that we needed it. And my younger sister kind of saw my older sister, the pressure that she faced, and basically hit on like LeBron James. Just every note she just nailed every single time, zero disappointments. Then saw me respond to that in the exact opposite way, where I was just trouble every day, a problem every day, an argument every day. And she was just like, well, I'm not going to do that either. I'll do my own thing where I'll get great grades, but I'm also not putting up with shit.
Yeah.
So, I'll get these grades, which should make me untouchable, but my parents, in their ever quest to control, had other issues and problems with her. And she just, even more so, or maybe at a younger age than me, was just like, fuck you and fuck this. I'm not doing it.
Okay. Was there ever good enough for them, or was it never good enough? Like if you excelled at a soccer game or basketball or football, or even when you did Life Begins, you mentioned your father. I don't know what your mother's impression was. Was there always like, you killed it? This is the best I've seen you. Or was always like, here's something you could have done better? Was it ever good enough, or was it never good enough?
Growing up, probably not. Like growing up, there really wasn't. Nothing was good enough, and probably that falls on my shoulders as well, because there was always some sort of issue behaviorally.
Yeah.
So even if I did well, I fucked up on some level that either embarrassed them or put me in bad standing with a teacher, coach, whatever. But as I've grown up, my mom couldn't be more supportive, couldn't be more proud, really like thinks I'm the shit. Like she likes my comedy. I mean, she was at my most recent special taping, which will be out probably in May. But yeah, and she, there's nobody that laughs harder, and these jokes are fucking ferocious in the sense that like most mothers would not be too pumped that their kids are talking in such a graphic, honest way about both their childhood, their adulthood, my drug use, my experiences, all that stuff. I come from, like I said, that Irish Catholic family that didn't really communicate all that well. So I am the pendulum that swung the full fucking opposite way. And I am a wild oversharer in hopes that my son will kind of settle more towards the middle.
I like it. When it comes to, you've been very open about the depression that you've had as a child, and your mother going through it at the same time that you were as a child. And I was talking to Andy Haynes about this. It's very similar kind of life that he led. And the question I had is, can you kind of tell me what it feel like to be depressed as a little kid? Because here is when you're supposed to be the happiest. Here is when you don't understand the concept of getting hurt or dying or death or finality, and but now that's a very real thing. So what did it feel like for you to be a depressed child?
Not obviously, but I do not suffer from bipolar disorder. At least I've never been diagnosed in that way. But I feel like it's similar with that, where I was a happy kid. I was definitely a happy kid. I don't want to make it seem like I was a shut-in, didn't enjoy life, like recluse, never had friends. I had a ton of friends. I was popular in school, all that stuff. But I'm really, really sensitive, and I've been that way my entire life. So the swings and insecurities are really dug deep in me, and it's taken a lot for me to fight out of that. Like for the first time, I'm confident in my comedy. For the first time, literally in the last couple of years, I finally feel okay and settled up on stage, where for a long time, and I get moments of not, but for a long time, it's all that imposter shit. It's trying to fool yourself. It's
Mhm.
it just games that you could play, but that insecurity, uncertainness, sensitivity, and wild swings from you know incredibly sad, I don't know what's going on, heaving, crying, to then
Mhm.
I'm on top of the world, I'm the best basketball player that's ever lived, and suck my dick, mom or dad, if you don't think that.
Yeah.
Then that's kind of what it felt. It felt very not unstable, but inconsistent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that like you were the main entertainer for your mom to kind of get her out her spells. You were the one that kind of cheered her up and
Yeah.
entertained her. What was it like for you being kind of you played kind of the father role for her. You kind of played the husband, not the father role, the husband role for her.
Mm.
You were the one that was supposed to make her feel better when she wasn't feeling good, and in return, as a thank you, she would physically abuse you. So how did that go? How did that go? As a relationship with your mom, at that was the entertaining more for her, or just be like when she's in these moods, it can go really bad for me, so I might as well keep her in a good mood, then less swings my direction.
Even with that, it still probably was for her.
Okay.
Yeah, like my mom definitely hit me, and it hurt
Hmm.
sometimes, but
Hmm.
other times, I'd glance that shit off of me, and it was
Yeah.
almost like a point of pride where I was like, your shit doesn't hurt me anymore, lady. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm a I'm a I'm a big boy now,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was probably more for her, because even through
Mhm.
that shit, I loved her, and I
Mhm.
wanted her to feel better and not be sad. I didn't really understand
Yeah.
what any of it meant.
Mhm.
So instead of I do a bad job of worrying about myself,
Mhm.
in the sense of, and not as though I don't think of myself, because I'm a
Mhm.
narcissist like most comedians, but I don't think of myself in healthy ways all the time.
Okay.
So it's very, very rarely about self-preservation, and more for just kind of keeping my outside at an even keel so I can focus on one problem at a time.
Okay. Your view. So your viewpoint of yourself. You just said I don't have the healthiest um view of myself all the time, but then you also just said I've never been more confident on stage as I am right now.
Yeah.
Um, are you taking? Are there is what are the steps that you're taking for self care? Then are you seeking out third party like therapy, or are your I didn't even know you're coming with a new album. That's incredible. Are your jokes more personal this time? Because Life Begins is an incredible album, but it's really funny because it's really funny about your standpoint of becoming a father for the first time. I mean, just the practice baby thing joke comes to mind right away,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but then there's also things like just being a marijuana versus cocaine and getting drunk in the back
Mm.
of Uber. Like it's very fun, but is this album more personal? Is that maybe why you're getting more confident now on stage, because this is more about things that I wouldn't know about you from watching your first two specials?
Yeah, and there's it's a bit of both, because this album has coffee versus cocaine. So so I do that stuff because it's still a part of my life, and I'm still that guy. But then there's all the other shit, right? Like I've
Yeah.
never been a dad before, and this is by far and away, without sounding too queefy, it's by far the most personal I've ever been on stage. I mean,
Okay.
we went through a pandemic where we lived at my in-laws for 14 months. And,
Yeah.
both my wife and I, we rely on congregation to make our living. So obviously the pandemic hit both of our pockets really hard.
Mhm.
And we left the city. We moved in with my in-laws. I've known them since I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
But it was obviously a struggle, because you just spend time, you share space with people that you're not used to sharing space with. Your job is away. You're cut off from your friends.
Mhm.
You're a new dad. There's all these different things going on. So it took me a long time to even write about it. It took me 12 months to find any of it funny, because I was actually just hurt and mad.
Yeah.
And so once I found it funny, I wrote basically the hour in 11 months, or 10 months, because it
Yeah.
all just came pouring out of me, as opposed to,
Mhm.
meticulously writing my observations or opinions on things. I'm
Mhm.
not a great take guy at all.
Yeah.
Like my opinion, is it vacillates or oscillates? Either way, it does not. Yeah, it doesn't stay sure. And I don't, I don't have 2-day confidence in any of my opinions. If I say something today with like firm eyebrows and this
Yeah.
is what I believe,
Yeah.
tomorrow you can convince me that that's the dumbest idea that anybody has ever had.
this new album now and the more personal take on it, what are some of the topics that you take on this album that you felt you were not comedically mature to take on for your first two of those topics?
So it's funny because I do think that like I don't know if I believe in reincarnation or any or past lives or anything like that, but there is a consistent theme in my life that I have to reckon with father figures. And something has happened or something has continued to happen throughout my life where those people are difficult for me. And living with my father-in-law for a year, he was a difficult guy to live with because politically we're on opposite sides of the spectrum, but I'm not incredibly vocal. I also, again, like I said, my opinion can change really rapidly, but he boxed me into what he thought I was, and then also became, similarly kind of a Q type, which has since, it's ramped down a bit since, but it was at the height of the pandemic. It was really stressful and really aggressive and really difficult to deal with because I was the main target. I was the guy. I was the only one that would listen to him. And he'd be boozing and I'd be smoking and he'd just fucking tell me what it is. There would be no room for interactive. I had no opinions. It didn't matter. He had the floor and it was that. So I'm not a political comedian at all. I'm not really a social commentary comedian at all. Although there are references throughout my set, you could kind of probably understand where my views are. But this, I thought it was important to handle that anger with empathy as opposed to judgment. Because when I first wrote this material, it was seething. It was, fucking smoke coming out of my nostrils and it was killing. But I don't want to sustain that feeling because I don't want to go through life with that bubbling beneath the surface because that's going to eventually come out on my son or my wife or whatever. So I want to be able to process those difficult things that make me angry, and then empathize with the root or the origin of where those come from. So it was a tough year. I tackled that stuff and my father-in-law's opinion and how he communicated with me. And I think probably the most loving, caring way that anybody would have done had they been put in that position as well, because it wasn't that. It was difficult. It was tough. It wasn't, there's love there, but it was fucking tough. And I think that I did a really great job of, and you'll hear it and agree or not, but I think I did a really good job of adding love to that, which, I mean, as you can see, as a country, we don't have much of that for people with opposing views.
Exactly. Did you invite your father-in-law to the recording?
I didn't. No, I didn't want them to come. And that's not because I expect them to hear it and I want them to hear it. I just think that it would have taken from my performance had I been worried about them seeing. Show up to the recording? He didn't actually. That's what's funny is like he did it just the one time and like it's almost like I don't know if he knew or whatever, but he didn't. No, it's so funny. But my mother did, and she loved it, and my wife's family came, and they loved it, and also agreed that it was handled with care and appropriately, because I'm not in the business of burning my family to the ground. I don't want that to happen. I'm not trying to get a divorce over 5 minutes. I'm trying to maintain my successful marriage while being honest, but also while growing. So my initial honesty, even though it's how I feel, it might not be how I feel eventually. So I don't have to stay with it just because that's how I felt. I actually consider that dishonesty.
That you pretty much had to take your father-in-law's diatribe because you are quote unquote a guest in his house kind of thing. I'm assuming you guys had met at a bar. You could have kind of go back and forth a little bit more, but it's like, hey, you're gonna be at my house. This might, all that stuff. So it's eye-opening. It's eye-opening. When your special Life Begins, it's really I love it so much because of, well, there's so many different reasons why I love it. I mean, I probably the reason I rooted for you for when I met you in person, and your use of language, and your interview is like, you really love alliteration. You like analogies, but not like the this is like this kind of thing. You like to kind of put like this very unconventional spin on an analogy. When you're writing material and you're writing jokes, how is it imperative to you that because we're getting inside the mind of Mike Cannon for that 45 to 50-minute special, and not all of us have walked a mile in your shoes, and so you're
Mhm.
using analogies to kind of bridge that gap from your viewpoint to the yokels that like myself that listen to it. um
Right.
what is it that you do to make yourself very relatable to the audience when you're talking so much about different things that you have opinions on?
Well, like, so even the reference, and this, I don't know, this developed over time. So I don't know if I went in with this as an objective, but
Mhm,
it's kind of, I am speaking how I speak normally
mhm,
more on stage than I ever have, if that
mhm.
makes sense. So I
Yeah.
am me
Mhm.
on stage, and I've always loved, the way I talk. It's kind of like Matt Christopher. Have you ever read his books?
I have
Like,
not, no.
they're old sports books for kids, like,
Okay.
the kid who only hit homers, and he'd use words like lambasted and
Yeah,
whatever, like just
yeah,
descriptive words that are accessible. I'm not Dennis Miller. I don't
yeah.
have, I don't use Sanskrit or like a dead Latin language reference where people are like, I don't even know what the fuck he's possibly talking about. I use like smart middle school
Yeah.
language. And the way that I do it is that my references are not only descriptive and colorful, and it's exactly what I want to say, but
Yeah.
those references, you understand my life based on what I just said, based on the reference I used. So
Yeah.
if I reference Aladdin, you get that I grew up watching Aladdin. If I reference, Matt Christopher, you get that
Yeah.
I grew up, watching Matt Christopher. There's certain things that I do, that even throwaways that are kind of under my breath, where
Yeah.
people will come to me after shows and be like, my favorite part is when you do this. And I'm like, that's why I do that.
Yeah.
Because I want one or two, or the pockets of people that are really fucking listening, that are nerding out over this shit, to
Yeah.
be like, oh man, I like that like little secondary line where I had a new joke where I say Dante's Inferno at the
Yeah.
beginning of the joke. And
Yeah.
then at the end of the joke, it's another reference to like Seventh Circle in Hell.
Yeah.
But they play either way. Even if you've
Yeah.
read Dante or not, it doesn't matter. But if you've read it, you're like,
Yeah.
this motherfucker read that book. I understand what he's talking about.
It's like
You
an
know what I
Easter
mean?
egg inside your joke.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm trying. I'm trying to show who I am
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. So it's not only in the material and the information that I'm giving you, but it's also the language that I'm using.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like I might put it on a bit, but it's because a bit too thick. But my mom read to me a lot when I was a kid. She is
Mhm.
she is very responsible for my, quote unquote expansive vocabulary,
Mhm.
middle school expansive. And that I like talking like that. I
Yeah.
think it's funny to say, water is cascading on my back,
Yeah.
as opposed to it was raining hard. you know
Yeah, no, I mean, just yeah, some of the things, because what you're doing and what sets you apart from so many other comics is your punchlines are amazing, but then there's also a bonus within the punchline. The way the word sounds is funny. So when you
Mhm.
go up there and say my mama's womb, it's like a good punchline, but it's also hilarious to say mama's womb on
Right.
a date. Or like I forget what you like talking about, like some kind of land pirate that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, these visuals you're creating where you know you're creating this thing that in my mind I know exactly I know exactly the setup and you're putting it in about 6 to 7 words based on how meticulous you are with words. How often are you going back to a premise and going back to something that you have written and going, okay, this word is too plain or too overused, I want to use something like homeostasis or whatever it was in the
Mhm.
one joke? Are you is that a purposeful thing, or is that really, like you said, just how you talk and none of that's written down, just comes off the cuff on stage or whatever?
It's my writing style now is even a little bit different than it was from Life Begins. Like Life
Mhm.
Begins was very, I sat down and I wrote that whole thing out, and then I took it to stage and really like meticulously worked it out, and
Mhm.
the language was very intentional in that way.
Mhm.
Now, because I feel more comfortable and I feel like I'm speaking like myself, I wrote 60% of my last hour on stage.
Okay.
So, and that's the most I've ever done in my entire life. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that that's how this one just came to be. It might be different for the next one. Obviously, things change and methods change, but I think it's because now that I feel free to be myself, it comes out. And the way I write is I'll write an idea or whatever in passing in my phone, then I'll take that to stage. I'll forget almost all of it except whatever the nugget is. And then like a cat cornered will fight, claw, whatever, and say something funny out of sheer desperation. And then maybe go back, listen to that, take the line that worked, write that down, try to full form a bit, and then take it back on stage, promptly forget all of that. Then again, out of just sheer fear and defensiveness, come up with something funnier. And I'm just stacking and stacking. So it's like, as much as I can get that works, I'll just keep coming back to it and try to stack that bit as much as possible. But now once the quote unquote technique is in place, it's not as conscious as it once was. Like now I'm just building bits as opposed to like, oh, and that's a good idea where I'll tangentially offshoot and then kind of come back to the story and so forth, so on, where I have those in my head, but now it kind of happens as opposed to, it's a planned out thing.
Yeah. Okay. And is that something that comes just, with your now revelation that this is the best, that you now feel confident as a comedian on stage? Is that confidence and this now attitude where you're going to write more on stage versus prep or whatever ahead of time? Is that more coming with just the amount of fame and credits that you're accumulating under your belt, and thus you are confident? Or is it that the more confident you get and the more present you are on stage, the credits then follow? Which one more so is it? Which one's the driver? The credits and the fame, or the confidence and the
I think it's the confidence comes first, because the credits and the quote unquote fame, that's all self-generated. So I'm grateful in the sense that a lot of people, they treat me really, really nicely and with not reverence, but with respect, where it's like, oh, this guy, he's been in the business for a little while, he's got credits or whatever. But it's like, honestly, most of the stuff that I do, and almost all of it now, is self-produced and self-created. So I'm just doing it. I'm not waiting for. I waited for Comedy Central for a long time. They've never put me on their channel for stand-up. I submitted for Netflix. Nobody at Netflix is interested. Perfectly fine. Similarly, across the board at other channels. So I could lay down and just be a comic in the shadows and do whatever, or I could create the life and career for myself that I think that I want, and also think that I deserve based on skill set. And that's just what it is. So it's the confidence and just everything that kind of comes along with that, just being a man, having a child. I mean, that has given me a level of don't give a fuck on stage. This isn't the end all be all of life. That couldn't be possible without him, because there's something, I love my wife. She is my partner. She has been here with me basically my entire career. She's fucking incredible. But there is something that happens when you are truly responsible for a human being's life, to that kind of recalibrates your perspective and what you feel like is important. And for me, at least, it had the effect where it's given me security in who I am as a comedian and performer.
Yeah. And that's touching. I was making a few notes there. It's touching to hear that. It's touching to hear that, that there's now this kind of new, not lease on life, is so cliche, but like this new perspective that you now take on stage. I don't give a fuck because being a dad is more important than this or whatever. But would you say that there's now more of a drive, now that you have a kid, to even more? I mean, you're successful in comedy already, but to even be more successful because of this spite with your father, that you saw your father give up acting and he took it out on you guys, specifically you specifically. So it's like, I'm not him. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to be a great father and make it work, trying to live out this dream. Is it spiteful, kind of?
That's how it was in the beginning. That was basically my entire career motivation, was to surpass where my father got as an actor and to beat him. But since then, this is what I do for a living. So it doesn't even matter. I've already, quote unquote, surpassed what he has done as an actor. So at this point, it's kind of like, one thing that my dad didn't do great as we grew up was he never upgraded his parenting software. Like it always kind of stayed to us being kids, and as if we really rely on him for everything. I mean, he still talks to me. I'm 37. He still talks to me like he needs to feed me in the morning, you know? So I never wanted to get stuck in that thought. I never wanted to have outdated software with an approach. So as soon as I felt as though spite was no longer servicing or driving me in a healthy way, because it certainly I needed it in the beginning because you suck at stand up. I was, I was delusional, all that shit. So I needed just something to drive me and push me up that hill as best as I could. But once you reach that thing, it's like, well, what am I going to keep digging back into that and like getting myself angry and whatever? It's like, no, I have to figure out a new driver. And my new driver is actually like, again, this is queefy and hokey and whatever, but I do a ton of mushrooms, so I've worked on this. Is love. Like the driving factor behind what I'm currently doing is my love for my family, my love for my wife, my love for my son, my need and desire for them to have a great life, my need and desire for myself to reach my highest potential as a comedian. Because I have grand aspirations in terms of my own skill level and career, and I can't control the accolades, credits, whatever comes my way, but I can definitely control my workflow, and I can I can control my output and how I approach this shit. So that to me is a maturing process. Whereas before I'd get hung up on opportunities that I wasn't getting, compare and despair, all that shit with other comedians. And now I'm really locked in on just creating the best shit that I possibly can and competing only against myself, as opposed to bringing somebody like my dad in that, and that's that anger driving force. It no longer suits me.
Okay. Amazing. Now, how do you get so raw when you're with your comedy? Especially, it sounds like you're the most raw with this new album that's coming out soon. What's the title of the new album? Or have you not titled it yet?
It's called White Privilege Homeless.
Amazing. It's already the best time I've ever heard in my entire life. How do you get really raw with your feelings about your insecurities when you write? Because from just this conversation I've had with you, I see a lot of similarities with how you grew up and how I grew up. And it's like, how do you let yourself be vulnerable on stage when vulnerability as a little kid would only get you hit and beat? So like, how do you do it now in comedy? What are some of the things that you've done to work on that?
Just get up, just do it as much as I can. Again, that's becoming myself on stage. You know what I mean? I love joke writers like, Mark Norman, Joe List, Sam Morrell. Those guys are great. They write some of the best bits ever. They're so fucking funny. I approach comedy in a different way because I feel like I'm just exorcising a lot of my own demons. I also consider myself a really good joke writer because, throughout the revealing nature of whatever I'm talking about, that shit is peppered. And that's important to me because I don't want to be a one-man show guy where it's dead silent for a minute and a half and then a titter pop at the end and you're like, solid bit, So that stuff is important, but it's more about comfortability and being myself. And again, that don't give a fuck that having a kid has afforded me, where it's like, I mean, you guys can hate me. I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? You can decide you don't like me. You think my perspective sucks. You think I suck. You think my jokes suck. I don't care because there's somebody at home that legitimately thinks I'm the greatest human being on earth, like the greatest in the entire world. And just that knowledge. And it's not all the time. I'm in a good place right now, obviously, but it's not all the time. But that security of emotional security has allowed me to then, walk further out on the branch and see what's going on.
You use drugs as a way to enhance your material, like you just said, like psychedelics, that kind of thing. Is that something where if you're hitting writer's block or whatever, that you'll utilize just to see, like, because I'm take it on purpose for joke writing?
So it's not, I don't use that stuff for jokes as much as I use it for me, where it's like, and the jokes come from that. So if I'm feeling if I'm feeling away, and again, this is for me. I'm not pitching mushrooms to anybody else.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people that thinks everybody should do mushrooms. I used to be, but now that I've seen it trip several of my friends' mental illnesses, I have a new upgraded viewpoint of that. And I think, that people should kind of proceed with caution. But for me, it constantly expands my worldview. It constantly makes me feel more connected to the people that I both love and don't know. And it constantly just shifts things and cleans me out of egoic, id stuff, that reptilian, fight or flight. I'm just in the mud right now. Fuck you stuff. I want to get beyond that. So if I personally am in a place where I feel writer's block or I feel stagnant, I just don't, feel good, then I'll do a mushroom trip. But it has nothing to do with my bits. Like that. I don't think, I'm not like, I'm going to have a hot 10 after this trip. I can't fucking wait. I'm doing it because I know that as soon as I'm done with this, I'll be in a better place to write whatever I want.
Yeah.
Once I'm even, and weed for me, weed is a different thing because hallucinogens are actually obviously much more seldom. I have a son. I can't be, driving him to preschool on fucking on Jupiter. So weed is a different thing where it's like I use it both medically and recreationally in the sense that I have overactive thoughts. My brain is constantly working a mile a minute, and oftentimes it's in an unhealthy way where I'm speaking poorly to myself. So weed does, and it doesn't do this for everybody, but it kind of shuts the 5-lane highway down to 1 lane. So it puts the construction cones up and it funnels traffic through the 1 lane, and thoughts might be moving slower, but at least they're manageable and isolated.
Nice. That's such a very that's such a great way of wording it. I couldn't have said better myself. But do you get high before you go on stage, or no? Does your delivery
sometimes I'm better. If I'm doing new, like if I'm trying to find new, then I will. I like to be high when I'm doing new material because it opens some trap doors and it opens some off ramps, and I'll go up there with a bit that I think I'm trying, and then by the 3rd line of it, I'm talking about something entirely different. So it helps in that way. But then you refine sober and go back sober, and I for big shows or whatever. Like I don't smoke before my special. I personally don't perform well in high stress situations while high. I don't. I used to drink, and I used to drink all the time before shows, and it would be fine most of the time, but the first thing that would go is my speech and shit. So it was immediately affecting my delivery, and I just recognized how that would not, it just didn't help me at all.
Exactly. It's funny how not funny, but it's interesting to me that like you said, like before my specials, because I wasn't getting high, as going back to your days of an athlete, like when you're making a foul shot, you always do the same things. You don't just on game day, you don't switch it up. Did you regret not getting high before your special then, because now you were in a lane that you were, not, your dad's there now.
No, I got high right after. I think I even blew a hit at my dad as he was walking away. But that's funny though, because I know that, and I pay attention to athletes and how they prepare for big moments and stuff. But at that point also, I'm not really smoking before sets. You know what I mean? Because they're already, again, I've found the new, so now I'm refining. So when I'm on the road, even I'm just like, I'm trying to work the hour. I'm trying to do these bits. I'm trying to remember the order. I'm trying to really focus on the words and how what message I'm trying to get across. So that stuff, I'm not really doing that until after. It's a nice little treat to give yourself as like, hey man, you did it.
I like it. So when you're, so I want to talk a little bit, I want to kind of pivot a little bit to being a father and a full-time comic. And it was nice when I watched Timing. It really was relatable. The fact that, I'm married, you're balancing like your relationship and comedy. And it was very much, I watched it when it came out a couple of years ago, and then I've watched it recently to prepare for this interview. And now knowing you a little bit better, I can see like this is more autobiographical for Mike than it is, than it's like a work of fiction or whatever.
Right.
Now let's add a kid to the, Timing part 2 or whatever. Are you constantly finding yourself fighting or struggling with yourself or fighting with yourself now that you have a son and your time? I know in other interviews you've justified, this is a long question setup.
Mhm.
You justified like, hey, I'm home more often than if I were having a full-time job. But it's like,
Yeah.
but like you also said like at 10 weeks old, you were on the road. So
Yeah.
are you constantly worried that you're going to miss out on things because you'll be doing a week in Vancouver, next
Mhm.
year or something like that? And your kid's going to learn to ride a bike or some shit. Like,
Yeah.
are you constantly struggling with yourself? And then how do you
Yeah.
know when to prioritize certain things then?
So yeah, the answer is yes. It's hard, man, especially now because my son is, obviously they do all new things when they first get here, but now he's doing like new human shit since he's autonomous and capable and moving around on his own.
Yeah.
So it's hard because what I do and the way that I've justified it is, yes, I do get to see him more than a lot of my friends that are parents who have regular jobs. They pretty much only see their kids for 10 minutes a week or a half hour a week every night before bed or when they wake up or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm really lucky that I have, minimum 3, sometimes 4 uninterrupted days where I'm just spending time with them. And so I'm the thing that I focus on is control what you can control. So I can't control that I'm going to miss stuff. I know that's going to be the case. I can communicate with him through that as opposed to hold in personal resentment against myself and then take it out on him, which I do think a lot of parents, including my own, have done. And it's really important to me that when I'm home, I'm fucking all in. I'm all in being a dad. I'm not a periphery character. My wife isn't the heavy lifter. She's got her own business. She's successful on her own. So we have a really great shared partnership in that respect, but it is, like I said, it's everything to me. So it's almost natural. It's hard work though, but it's natural for me to be like, I am your dad when I'm home. There's no bullshit. I'm not going to be half here, half not.
Have you learned to kind of forgive yourself in a way? Because I'm also from the school of thought like, yes, when I'm with my kid, I'm fully there, but sometimes you're just exhausted. So, do you forgive yourself, or do you then punish yourself because it's like, gosh, I'm mentally and physically exhausted to not be with this kid right now, but I'm also like, I don't want to be my dad. Don't be my dad. So now you're like, you're exerting more energy. Have you forgiven yourself, or do you still beat the shit out of yourself when this moment happen?
The forgiveness usually comes after a pretty stern punishment. So I beat myself up quite a bit. And even like, I just, like I said, I took my family to Aruba and I didn't go on vacation with my parents ever. I think we went on 3 vacations. One was to Amish country. One was to Mystic, Connecticut. And the other was to like Wildwood. Like we never got on a plane together. Didn't do any shit like that. So the fact that I was able to fly based on jokes, that never gets lost on me either, is when I find myself in Kuwait and I'm looking out at the desert with all this crazy architecture and I'm standing next to Gary Veeder and I'm just like, and we turn to each other and I'm like, hey man, jokes got us here. We're on the other side of the world right now because of jokes. It was the same way when I just took my family on vacation. I'm like, fucking jokes, man. Jokes just took my family on vacation. That's incredible. But then through the vacation comes it's hard work. Vacationing with a toddler is a full-time job. And then I'm working also on top of that. And then you add the beating sun of the motherfucking equator. And so, I was so worn down and tired and just like fucked up that I had a moment on like the 3rd day where I was just like, I'm an emotional guy. So I just started crying. I'm like, I feel bad for feeling bad, because I know I'm going to look back on the vacation and be pissed at myself for being frustrated and for being tired and for being whatever. So like that, I'm already 15 steps ahead of what's already going on right there. But that moment of just emotional overwhelm and in my past, I would have locked that in and probably like yelled at my wife if she asked what was wrong. But instead, now I'm talking through that and I'm telling her exactly why and how I'm feeling. And that I'm just like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is where my brain is going, but I need to exercise this thought before fully getting over it.
Yeah. But I think that's what makes you such an incredible person, like, is that you are able to be like that, because you are thinking that 15 steps ahead, because you're
Mhm.
thinking of other people, where your father was thinking growing up, I'm thinking about how I can make myself happy right now, kind
Right,
of thing,
right.
versus him thinking 15 steps ahead about other people. So I think that's what's really incredible. I'm not going to talk about your dad like that, but I'm just saying, like, I'm
No,
trying to
no.
emphasize how great of a person you are, and to give yourself some kind of permission, because, dude, I'll be 37 very soon. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old. I know exactly what it's like to be a now. I wish I was working
Oh,
the
wow.
schedule of comedy that you're working. You know,
3 and 5 months, man.
yeah.
Woo!
But like, no, but I understand. Like, when you're talking about, like, this is my career, how many weekends
Mhm.
do you have to work in a year to provide the level of income to just not be worried as
Yeah.
a co-provider of the family? How many weekends do you have to work a year?
So now it's more, but more based on that it's going well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once it gets to kind of fever pitch, then I'll be able to figure out how much I'm willing and
Mm-hmm.
what I can do and structure it around that. But right now I'm kind of getting while the getting's good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I've never had this in my life. I'm a national headliner now, like that,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like I'm in other markets, I'm doing different things, and I'm taking opportunity because I just know how scarce that is and how difficult it's been to get to this point.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, there. But then, like, taking my family to Aruba is an
Yeah.
important part of that. So I have to carve out the time.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, it's like, it's 3 weekends to 4 weekends a month. I'm out on the road, and I'd like to eventually be able to do that to 2, or
Mm-hmm.
even do those single night runs where people play theaters and make a gang of money and shit like that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to build myself up until points, and also know my limits at the same time, where
Yeah.
I'm not gonna kill myself to do, Des Moines or whatever. But
Mhm.
I do want to put in a lot of effort to get into markets that I haven't been in, and make sure that those people know me, and I have a relationship with those clubs, because I know how this shit goes. You could be hot one minute and then be whatever the next, and
Yeah.
those relationships are what sustain us. So
Yeah.
that's more or less what I'm thinking of in terms of long term.
Exactly. Exactly. And the more specific you can be, the better. But how has what you said no to changed going forward? Because you just said, like, hey, it's, you can be hot one minute, cold the next, or are you
Yeah.
worried if you turn something down, like, another comic will be biting at your heels? What has now changed as a result of having a child that you can say no to?
Dude, saying no is like my favorite thing on earth right now. It
Good for
is.
you.
It is
Good for you.
fucking awesome. This is the first time that I've been able to do it. It's like offers that I would have jumped at 2 years ago
Mhm.
that are just patently unfair, but I
Mhm.
would have jumped at them to prove myself, and to, that old athlete adage, right? You
Mhm.
bring me in, dude, I guarantee I'm going to kill, and then you'll bring me back, because that's what's fair. And
Yeah.
that's just not what happens.
Yeah.
Fair is not show business. Fair is bullshit.
Mhm.
It's you have to get while the getting's good, like I've been
Yeah.
saying, and you
Yeah.
have to make money when you can, and you have to know your worth, because some of those offers that are just bullshit. And once you say, this is my base, this is my floor, and
Mhm.
you need to rise above this to bring me out, people
Mhm.
not only think, like, the perception is like, oh, he's doing great. Like,
Mhm.
he must be doing. So even if you're not, it's just like, wow, this guy must be getting these offers somewhere if
Yeah.
he's capable of just saying no. So,
Mhm.
I've gotten, even recently, like, somebody was like, hey, do you want to do a show for Snapchat? It's an 8, it's a cool opportunity. It's an 8-hour filming day, X amount of money, which was dog shit,
Yeah.
but you'll get a ton of exposure because we have a lot of subscribers and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, if you have a lot of subscribers, then you can afford to pay me a human rate. And if you don't, then that's fine. I don't
Yeah.
want to do it. You guys sought me out anyway.
Yeah.
Like, this was not here a minute ago. So I'm
Yeah.
not to sweat missing out on an opportunity that didn't exist to me before
Mhm.
you showed up. I'm not going to allow people's excitement to take advantage of me to
Yeah.
allow them to take advantage of me.
Yeah. I you're not the first person to say know your worth, and it's hard for me to understand how do you know your worth in a market where people where the pay is very discreet, secret. I mean, it's not like I can look up what was Mike Cannon played at the Ha Ha Hut and
Sure.
this weekend and then base my thing off of that. How do you know what your worth is? What are some of the things that you have come to make a very educational decision?
Yeah.
On what your
I mean,
worth is?
I think it's also important for transparency. I have comics that I talk to about rates.
Mhm.
And there are people that I know and trust and love that will
Mhm.
give me straight answers financially. And I'll do the same for comedians that I know and love and trust. So there is a baseline of information in that way. But to be perfectly honest, a real game changer was when my manager is incredible and he's not working with a company. He's an independent guy. He's just as hungry as I am. I've been waiting my entire career to meet somebody that is willing to put in the amount of hard work that I'm willing to put in, because I work my fucking ass off and I demand that the people that work with me and for me do the same. And that's not something that, people who don't work for Will Smith are really, are into hearing. You know what I mean? It's like people are like, well, you don't make that money for me to care that much. And it's like, well, if you want to make that money, you better start caring, because that's how you get to that level. So it's just my manager stepped in and he has a knowledge of the business and also a fan of mine and really got me comedically. Cause like I said, none of this shit has been handed to me industry side. So everything has been self-manufactured. So with that, you kind of get lost in terms of what your worth is, because my worth to me might not be what it is to other people. And it's obviously it's not, or else I'd be offered shit. So you get kind of like, am I a nobody? Like, am I just putting this shit out for no one? Like, does anybody care? What am I worth? What should I quote it? I'm trying to get into these clubs. Should I take their bare minimum and, break even on the week? But he came in and he's like, this is what you're worth. This is what you can sell. Let's break down your analytics, your social media, all of that stuff. And so tangibly, we have something to then present to clubs and saying, this is what we can do. So just that organization on the business side, because I'm trying my best to be funny, so that it's really hard to focus on that kind of stuff or be good at it. And again, like I said, math, I'm terminally dumb when it comes to that. So it really helps to have somebody that believes in you, outside of your family, who I'm always skeptical has to.
Your joke, especially your joke on abortion, is such your competitive advantage versus other comedians. And I like this joke about abortion because as soon as you bring up the premise of abortion, I've seen so many comics go down this road and people shout like, abortion's not a joke, but you're so good at like this tactfully thing. And I'm very much in your camp. The broad use like I said, I'm very much in the pro-choice camp of everything. That it's like, but I appreciate the tact of how you did it when you write jokes like this. And your brand and what you deliver on stage is so important, especially for where you are in this kind of upswing where you're this trajectory where that you're currently on. How do you make sure that you can provide this tightrope act of hilarious, unique perspective on abortion, but then not be offensive?
I fail at that sometimes, but but it's going on the road and it's performing in front of different audiences where I have an audience of my own. I'm constantly trying to grow that audience, but I'm not somebody who has an indoctrinated audience with a very specific ideology. So my people come from all over the place and they're from different lives. They have different political affiliations. They have different social affiliations, all of that stuff. So it's important to me to be able to express my opinion while not appealing to everybody, but to be undeniably funny to everybody, because that's our only real job. I'm not trying to change anybody's opinion. I think, I used to argue with people on Facebook and it's the most fruitless endeavor anybody could possibly enter into. And the exact same goes for stage. I am in no position or I have no desire to debate with anybody about any single issue. What I want to do is say what I think while being as funny as humanly possible. And that's all I care about. And I do think that, you know, like I said, I worked out some of this QAnon shit with my father-in-law
Yeah.
in QAnon heavy fucking areas.
Yeah.
So that's the best way I can say it is right. And similarly with Frank Rigatone, just to mention that again, which is a web series that was based on my father-in-law and a couple friends and my father. But it's important to me to make both extremes feel like think that I'm working for them. So, you know, because there are people that are Q people that watch Frank Rigatone. They're like, it's about goddamn time. Hell yeah, dude. That's fantastic. And then there's people on the, you know, opposite left that are like, you're skewering them. Good job. Great for you. And I'm like, I'm actually kind of just spraying bullets at everybody. And my job is to just, you know, destroy your God while being as funny as humanly possible. And I'm not trying to start a cult. I don't want people to like me because they agree with me. I want people to like me because they like how I tell jokes and they admire how open and honest and unflinching I am about certain shit.
That's good.
Oh man, there's so many people that agree with me that are like, fuck, you know, I look at it as like I get called an alt-right racist and also a lib cuck pussy routinely. And I think that is the best because, you know, both people, they're pissed and it's like, that's good. Then I'm challenging a little bit.
How do you not get that? This was okay. I had another question, but now that you brought that up, I'm like, how do you not let that affect you? Because I have certainly told jokes in the past where someone will come up to me at the end of the show and goes, I just want you to know I didn't appreciate that one joke. And it gets in my head. And it flows, like, how do you like what I need this advice now. So what is it? How do you not let these people get to you for bits that you think are funny, but now you think that, oh shit, someone found it offensive or you're ruining somebody's night now by saying like that? How do you?
It does. It does affect me. You know, I love comedy and I love hard comedy. So the type of stuff I like, I don't even, you know, I love Nick DiPaolo politically or whatever. We don't agree on a lot of shit, but
he's a cute guy.
But I can suspend my beliefs and whatever to find the humor and entertainment in what he's saying. And he's really smart and the way that he phrases stuff is really original and cool. But, you know, it doesn't mean that I'm like signed up for his newsletter. But when people say that they're actively hurt by something that I say, I do take that in. Like I said, I'm a sensitive, empathetic guy. So if somebody comes up to me and they're like, that fucked me up, man, then that resonates with me. But if it's some dippy white girl who's had 16 Pinot Grigios and she's like, I like you said that, then I'm like, I'm so glad I hurt your feelings.
Nice. So the question I was going to ask is about this Life Begins special, which I'm going to put a link to it so people can watch it. It's free on YouTube.
Cool.
I consider you as like the cusp of this YouTube now phenomenon. I know you have credited Andrew Schultz. To be fair, I knew you before I knew Andrew Schultz, so I always credit you as the first one to do it, and it's a wildly successful medium to do so. I like also that it's not a traditional special. I like the fact that you incorporated the Tough Crowd crew into your it's a little bit of a documentary. Tells me a little more, the curtains pull back a little more behind the scenes, and they're shitting on you. And from the interviews, it's like, that's what I wanted. I never got to be on Tough Crowd when it was on TV. This is like my own time to be on Tough Crowd.
Exactly.
You mentioned halfway through, like an hour ago now at this point, about the fact that father figures is a huge thing in your life. Your own father, big issue. Your father-in-law is a big issue. These gentlemen who comprise Tough Crowd, the Quinn, the Nortons, the Kellys, the bosses, do you see them? Are these your father figures? Are these, because you said these are the people who I want their respect. I look up to them. Are they the people who their opinion means more to you than any other male in your life at this point, besides your son?
Yeah, 100%. And you know, I'm sure they'd all kill themselves if they thought if they heard I said they were my father figures. But it's the craziest thing to me that the guys that I grew up listening to and that actually got me into stand up as a fan, and now obviously as a performer, I'm now friendly with, you know, and especially and friends with almost all of them. I'm sure some of them would I'm sure Voss would be like, no, but but you know, Bobby and I especially, we've gotten extremely close. Jim and I have gotten close, you know, Voss, Colin, Keith, but you know, they yeah, it means everything to have their respect, because I also see them for what they do, which is they do comedy for the right reasons. They're trying to be great comedians. It's the same reason why I love Eminem and like Kendrick and J. Cole and rappers that are trying to rap to be the best rappers. You know what I mean? Like there's raps that are just, you know what, you want to party, you want to whatever. And there's certainly comedians that are like that as well. But I'm doing comedy to trying to be one of the best comedians alive. And their approach is what instilled that in me, that honesty, that rawness, that need to not only be as funny as humanly possible, but to fucking show people who they are. That just their outlook on comedy has completely shaped my approach. And because of that, I'll always seek their approval.
Nice. Which one of them did you shit your pants the most approaching to be in your special?
Colin, 100%. Even though Colin's the reason, literally the reason I got in at the Comedy Cellar, he's just, you know, Bobby, Jim, I do their shows. Around Keith. Colin's a different animal because even they look up to him.
He's definitely,
you know, like he's Mount Rushmore to me. He's one of the greatest of all time. So I asked him almost like sheepishly, like, hey, dude, just tell me to fuck off. Like, don't worry about it. He's like, yeah, of course. I'll see you at the Cellar. And I was like, I mean, all of them were so generous with their time. And I'll never forget that.
I don't like it. I like, you know, it broke it up and they're just talking shit on you. It's really funny. And it's another way for you to incorporate a difference. Like, how can I keep this medium of special evolving, you know? And it's a way to break up the act into this other, like, hey, it's a little bit like a roast of my candidate.
And I also, you know, at the time, that was my first visual anything. It was my first special or anything. So I felt almost unworthy of putting out an hour of just straight jokes. Like I didn't think anybody would want that from me. So I had this idea and also the story behind me getting into the Cellar and the meaning behind all of them even being involved. So that's how I approached it. Now with this one, my evolution is like, all right, so I had some exposition. I had this thing that cut it up. Now here's a straight fucking hour of jokes. This is all my fastballs for 60 minutes. So here you go.
No, was there anyone that you asked that said no?
No, actually, the one person I asked that we just didn't have time, and it also I got everybody else, so it didn't make sense, was Bonnie.
Oh, okay.
I wanted Bonnie to be involved in it because I just find her to be so fucking funny, and I also was considering like bringing in Opie and Anthony and like separately and kind of having them involved, but it felt better to kind of just focus it down to the 5.
Mike, I appreciate your time on this, man. I had a blast talking to you. I'm super appreciative of your honesty, your communication, your openness, the fact that you just, I mean, I'm going to tag your YouTube account because I don't think anybody during the pandemic created as much content as you did during it. I mean, just the different formats. I mean, check out, I mean, he has so much, the one that we didn't talk about that I would say check out is Sibling. I really enjoyed.
Oh, thanks, man.
Siblings. I thought that was very good as well.
Yeah, I got a whole 6-episode arc written for that. So if you got money and want to shoot it,
I don't know if there's any more to do, but I want you to do more of it. But definitely check them out. I think it's I am Mike Cannon on Instagram. Right?
So youtube.com Mike Cannon Comedy. Okay. It's all my social is I am Mike Cannon because some real estate broker named Mike Cannon decided to sit on that one and hasn't posted in like 14 years. But check that out. And YouTube has both of my hours up there, and then my third one is forthcoming.
Yeah, awesome. And check out Mike Eats Edibles, which is
hell yeah. I'm about to film a crowd special on edibles too. Oh, dude, we're doing Mike Takes Edibles, the crowd work special. And I'm going to take 100 milligrams and do a crowd work special.
I love it. But dude, thank you for your time, man. This was a blast.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
I'll let you know when this drops, but good luck. Let me know when that special comes out. I'll definitely be watching it. So, all right, brother.
Awesome. I will.
I'll see you, buddy. All right, bye.
All right, dude. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.